and the time is 12 past 2. Alhamdulillah, this is our second show, the second week of the show. Last Monday, the 6th of May, we've had one of our elders, Sheikh Abdurrahman Yawili, to discuss about the life in Somalia in general. So that we what we try to do is we try to understand, the Somali community over here, the challenges that they face and everything over here better. So in order for us to do that, what we did is we went back to how life was in Somalia for the elders, the ones, our parents that raised us in here, just to have a better understanding. So Alhamdulillah, we've had him last week to discuss about life in general in Somalia and growing up and going to school, the educational system in Somalia, employment, and the cause of the civil war. If there was any signs indicating the total collapse of the state and stuff like that. And Alhamdulillah, we've discussed how migrating from Somalia into Western countries was, how they've settled into the new country over here in the UK or any other part in Europe. And you can find the whole program on our Revive FM's own Facebook page. However, today's discussion is going to be totally different. Well, not totally, but somehow, I guess. And so, inshallah, it will be based on the first generation parent and young people who came here at a young age, like ourselves. And so, our guest here is somebody who I've known for about 7 years, I'd say, roughly.
Seems that way.
Yeah. About 7 years, who like myself has been heavily involved in the Somali charity work, community work, and we both have worked tirelessly to represent our community on various platforms, from local community engagements, community outreach programs to the Met Police's advisory group on crime and young people, etc. So hopefully, inshallah, we will try to have an informed discussion about matters facing our community. Ahmed Ade, mashallah, kusoo dhawaw program ka.
Pleasure.
Welcome. So, inshallah, we will kick off. What we will try to do, inshallah, we'll try to have a discussion in English first, and occasionally we'll mix it in Somali or however it works. So, we'll whatever works. So. Inshallah. Okay, so Ahmed, my question to you is, obviously the problem that we have over here is huge. There's so many problems that we face, us being black, us being Muslim, in a minority community. The challenges, are so many. And what are your thoughts on the first generation immigrant parents?
First of all, thank you very much for welcoming me to your show. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be able to voice my opinions actually to the people. If we cut straight to the point, first generation parents, first generation immigrant parents that have come into UK seeking a better life are a little bit of an oddity actually with society, as on the overall society really. They haven't really worked with society in a cohesive way. They've somehow managed to stay exclusive to themselves.
Yep.
And not only in physical representation, but actually in thoughts as well. And I think that's a key point where a lot of people have missed out on.
Mm.
And I think, definitely a lot of issues that we can have a look at and see if we can identify.
So, obviously, since they've, when they first arrived, it's a totally new culture, new religion. Obviously, nobody, the country as a whole, obviously, it's not Islamic country. Whatever that they're used to, the social norm is different. So, how have they coped, in your opinion? Arriving in this country and raising their kids. Have they excluded themselves from society, or have they attempted to be part of society?
I think the older generation haven't realized how much they excluded themselves. But if you really have a word with them, they will probably tell you, yeah, we're part of society. We've done everything possible. We've done everything possible for you, more importantly. And I think there's a slight sense of we have prioritized you as our children, and therefore we put our hopes on you. But maybe that is an unspoken sort of rule. But nonetheless, that doesn't excuse the fact that they haven't taken part of society as a whole. A lot of us, a lot of our parents have been here for 20 years.
Yeah, nearly 30 years. I mean, majority of, since if we just take, say, from the Civil War until now, Civil War started, it broke out in 1991, I guess, and the first migrants probably arrived after the Civil War from 1991 and 92. So that period until now, I think it's nearly 30 years. So for 30 years, some have been here for 30 years. I think the first rule of integration is the language.
100%.
Yeah.
They haven't done that.
Yeah. So if you don't learn the language first, you can't really expect yourself to integrate in any society, because obviously once you learn the language, a whole new world opens up to you, and all of a sudden, you can be open, you can be part, you can educate yourself, you can go out and you can work, and obviously it breaks down that barrier. But rule number one, they just haven't done that. Why do you think they haven't taken the opportunity to learn the language?
I think the sense of self-identity, the pride that they've come here with, is far stronger than allowing them to change. But I think that's a naive way of thinking as well. What they've come here for was not to be part of society. It wasn't.
What was it for?
What they've come here for was to be safe, to take their children to safety.
Yeah.
Essentially, if they were going to have more children, to be able to give birth in somewhere that's actually, safe, somewhere with a lot of opportunities the children can take advantage of. But unfortunately, they haven't realized their actions will dictate how their children turn out as well.
Yeah.
And hence why we hopefully will discuss later on, but our young are so disillusioned and so far apart, so far removed from society, and so far removed from what our parents are like and what they want us to be like, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to last week's discussion, for example, one of the things, we had one of our elders, Sheikh Abdurrahman over here, one of the things that he said that they obviously main idea was to, just to flee, that place, that was their country, and to come into a safe country where, they could raise their kids, and where they kids can go to school or something like that. So as soon as I think they've got here, and they were able to take their kids to school, they felt like they have reached their goal, and that was it. So they didn't need to try to integrate or learn the language or anything like that. So their goal was basically, I think, alhamdulillah, we're here, and the rest, it will just, it will fall into place. And
I think so. I think you're right. Sheikh Abdurrahman's comments were quite interesting, actually. They were very representative of our parents' view. They're very proud of the fact that they've managed to come here and have been able to give us a stable life. Yeah, 100%.
Well,
I commend them for that. I commend them for the effort. I mean, when we, I'm a first generation child of an immigrant. So I myself came here as a child, and I remember life back home. I came here as a teenager, and I remember it quite well. But also it means that I'm able to cultivate life here in a very different way from my parents. But what Sheikh Abdurrahman was saying was really interesting, is that the pride and actually a very well-placed pride that he had was to say, we've sacrificed everything that was us to run away from, from instability, from war, from persecution and things. We've brought you here. We've taken you to education. We've put you through education. We've given you safety. We've given you, roof over your head. Go get the world. Go do something. But I think what was neglected in that thought, although it was a great way of thinking, what's neglected is that young people learn by example.
Absolutely. Obviously, you need your parents' support and guidance. So without it, I don't know how far you can go.
I think the example that the older generation have given us, this isn't at all, in the Sheikh Abdurrahman's position at all, but this is the wider community of Somalis. They have because of their sense of disillusion, their sense of, we don't need to do anything except just live.
Yeah.
And, that in itself was enough. And we can only tell our children, go and do this and go and do that, and become a doctor, become a lawyer, become so-and-so, and that will be it, kind of thing. And you can look after us and look after your family and back home and things like that. Maybe those were the ideas. They're wonderful and everything.
Yeah.
If
Not very practical though.
It can be practical if you as the adult are reinforcing the ideas that you're trying to get your children to inherit from you, if you're living them. If you're not living them and you're secluded, if you're secluded from society, you're not going to get anywhere.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of parents who have no communication, no solid communication with their children. That doesn't seem to have any kind of back and forth. Sheikh Abdurrahman mentioned that young people, children or their children, choose to speak in English at home, just like we're doing now. You said, I believe, versatility. It offers us a lot more. Yeah, you're right, because we're not in a society which is just in the home. Yeah, in the home we have a society, but outside of the home in itself, there's a much bigger society. And if you're not part of that, you're not going to get anywhere. So language was prime, even though it was a subconscious thing. Children didn't have to think about, I have to learn language. It was a very subconscious thing.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I think a lot of us did when we came to this country is to learn the language immediately. And then after that, obviously, once you do that, then, you go out and you find yourself. And then when you come back home, you are restricted to speak in Somali. So there was always that. So alhamdulillah, I mean, if we move on to the our next point, which is, is there a disconnection between our parents, the first generation immigrant, and their children? So do you think it has, how should I put it? Okay. When they first arrived into the obviously the country, and they didn't really expect things to unfold as it is now, and obviously they've had a different idea that they will go into a different Western country where it's much more stable, opportunities, lots of opportunities, everywhere and things like that, and things have unfolded differently, and then the youngsters have gone on to obviously learn English and discover themselves or even wider society, and as a result, I think they have lost they language and some level of identity. So that created maybe a disconnection. Is there a disconnection between the parents and the children? How do you see it?
100%. I think the only agreement between children and their parents, and when I say children, I don't mean very young children. I mean, somebody who can think about the world and think about what it is they want to be in that world. Yeah, there is a sense of disconnection, a disillusion between them as well. Yeah, because what our parents represent is very reminiscent of what life was like back home.
Back home, yes.
They live exclusively in that mentality.
They do. Up until now, probably. Very
much. They don't need to change. We're not trying to change them. There's no point in wanting, enforcing some idea on them and saying, you've got to go and get the world kind of a thing. No, it's not necessary. It's that they need to make the right changes. The parents I'm talking about, first of all. The right parents, in order to improve the communication that exists between them and their children. Likewise, young people, there has to be a point at which they self-govern and they now have to make the right choice themselves and are able to communicate with their parents on par, on the with the right language of communication, be it whether that's in Somali or English, but with the right language of communication, but more importantly, the right topics of communication, so that the gap between the young and and essentially us and our parents closes, because otherwise the next generation, our children and their children, will be that much more removed from essentially what would be their grandparents or great grandparents, and they're not going to identify with them.
Yeah, and the thing is, the way I see it is, some parents didn't even see that disconnection between them and their kids, and I don't know whether it was in denial or something. For example, if you were you got into trouble in school or whatever it is outside, they weren't much involved in their kids' life, so that you can literally hide. I mean, I know that is the case for a lot of parents, not exclusively thingy for the Somali,
Yeah.
but they weren't aware of a lot of the things that their kids were up to. So it's just that as soon as you come home, life is good, everything way, you act normal, but they didn't really know anything about you outside of the house. I think that what happened was slowly that disconnect between the parents and their kids obviously just widened. Probably for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and to an extent that the whole thingy just exploded, I think.
You make an interesting point. I think you're right. They don't know anything about us. They don't know anything about the young. It starts from essentially when children are probably about 6 or 7, because, or even earlier than that, because what happens is parents nowadays, in this day and age, we've got amazing technology that can distract us.
We are parents as well.
We are parents ourselves, you're right. You see, what our parents, or the mistake our parents did, and I'm only talking in the sense that we're looking at the older generation, which is our parents, and what now would be adults, us, who are outright parents ourselves.
Exactly.
But how much can we actually look back and say, that happened? And then how can we compare that to our children? Or very young children with similar parents as us? I think there's a slight difference. When we came to this country, technology was at the beginning.
Yeah.
Our parents, they came here as very poor migrants, couldn't afford everything the world had to offer. So, you know what? We actually had conversations with people. We went out, we played football. If anything, we went, and had fun. Nowadays, that's not the case. You have young people who the parents buy them a telephone, a mobile phone, or a tablet or something like that, and they learn from that. Because from very young age, from toddler level, they're able to use technology quite well, far better than the parents themselves. Meaning, they spend a lot of their time in YouTube, spend a lot of their time listening to other people's opinions, further creating a divide between the opinions the parents would wish their children to inherit and the children themselves. Totally. So yeah, there's 100%.
Which will take us to the next point. In your opinion, to what extent do you think our parents had an influence or support for our future growing up?
I think it was a verbal support. That's about it.
Verbal support.
Verbal support. Some parents, sent their children to tuition and things like that. Some of us needed it, some of us didn't. But alhamdulillah,
I think that is a very small number of parents that actually sent their kids to tuition.
Well, I have...
Probably now I think it's different. We're talking about maybe, for example, when I was in secondary, I don't even know if there was tuition centers at that time. We're talking about 98, 99.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was any tuition centers at that time. So at that time, in terms of support, for example, in my opinion, there was none.
Right.
There was none. Now, obviously, it's different. But early stage, for me, there was none. I don't know about yourself.
I've never been to one either. I came here not speaking English, apart from the very basic, what's your name, and how to answer that. And things like that. I didn't know. I had no idea what tuition was. Tuition was, if anything, in my mind, came about maybe about 12 years ago. 13 years ago, thereabouts. And at that point, I was quite well established, myself.
I mean, isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that, they in fact, we were in the school, and as far as they're concerned, we were getting, a good education, but not being involved how, we were doing at school, or, the level of education we were receiving, or even we had GCSEs or anything. Basically, there was no involvement whatsoever. So how can you expect? How can you say that? Okay, we brought you here, so that you can get a good education, when you're not even involved in the kids' educational life.
I think that point is something that the parents don't take fault in, not in the normal way we'd like to think of it. I think a lot of parents came here without language skills themselves. It would have been far more difficult for them to learn the language than it would have been for us. We, as young people, would have been neurologically better wired to learn things far quicker anyway. I think linguists talk about something like if from teenage years onwards it starts to get more difficult to learn a new language. A lot of these parents would have come here as what we would like to call full-grown adults.
Yeah, but
right?
to encourage or support, it doesn't really need...
But that being said, encourage and support, the only thing they could have given us was go and study, do well, don't get into crime and don't get involved with
basic stuff,
unnecessary people. That's the only thing they could do, which is great in itself, but they couldn't actively take part in our education because they themselves didn't have a grasp of the language. Even if they were mathematically or scientifically oriented themselves, they would have still had difficulty understanding the language in itself. They didn't put in enough effort to learn the language, meaning they never actually, at this point, they still haven't learned English very well.
They haven't.
So how could they have helped us when we needed it?
I mean, that is until now, I can't seem to understand. I mean, obviously, this is sometimes it's different because your expectations are different. But to be in a country for 30 years and not absolutely learn the language at all, how does that come about?
I think they reached their goal. I think they reached the goal they came here with. The only thing left is to grow old and hopefully be buried back home. I'm pretty sure that's reminiscent with most parents.
So everything is linked with
but
back
most
home.
Parents, because their goal was to come here, provide safety, right? Because they ran away from war. Provide safety, provide food, provide education. What else do they need to provide? Provide for their family back home, send a little bit of money. Beyond that, there was nothing else.
There was nothing else.
Now, very few people. First of all, Somali people are generally very entrepreneurial. They like doing things. But if we look at the wider representation of our community, we're not present in the wider society, meaning our entrepreneurial mind is somewhat dulled. If anything, mothers...
It's very limited.
Very limited. I think mothers themselves have the idea, have children. They had that idea back home. They came here with it. I need to have children to be successful. That's what it means to be successful, to have children. And not only to have children, to have healthy children. Alhamdulillah, great, it's a good thing. But beyond that, they didn't have any effort. I mean, our mothers, I think, represent part of the problem themselves exclusively because a lot of them are not as educated as we would like them to be. They're not on par with other women in other societies, from other nationalities and in the indigenous people here as well. Well, I don't know what that is, but a lot of them would have had education which would have been fine back home. They had the right level of education for back home. Here, we are presented with different challenges, new ways of thinking.
Hold on, our mothers, they didn't even have the right education back home.
You're right, first of all. You're right.
Well, without... Listen, I don't want to turn this into, a mother bashing or anything like that. But, some of them, even Islamic education, they don't even have the Islamic education.
I was coming to that point.
So the mentality is totally different. It is very, women belong to...
No, you're right. It's a very dogmatic way of thinking. Sadly, it's a very submissive way of thinking from one aspect, and it's a very dogmatic way from a different aspect. You have mothers. If I even separate education in itself, you had the academic education. You have the religious education in itself. We as Muslims look at our religion as society. It's what helps us function in society. Contrary to what a lot of people believe, we learning the religion means you can function better in society. That's what husn al-khuluq actually is. The ulama would be able to explain that far better. You know, after the shahadatain, before the salah, if you have no husn al-khuluq, the rest of them may not be even accepted. What that means is, in order, you need to be able to educate yourself and learn the right things in order to have the right conversations and right integration with other people, because that's what husn al-khuluq actually is. Our mothers, unfortunately, didn't have the right level of education in Islam to know what their own rights are. They didn't have the right level of education in this society because they stayed, you know, they excluded themselves from it to some degree. But I think actually it's our fathers that are to blame, and I would like to put the blame far more on our fathers, because maybe not you and I, but you know, on the average, it's our fathers that were the breadwinners back home. The mothers were masters of the home. It was a binary relationship which worked for them when they were there. Here, the challenges are very different. Over there, society raises your children with you. You can have 7, 8, 10 children. You know, alhamdulillah, I know people with more than 20 children, by the way. They're not here, they're back home. But society helps them. There is no such thing as a closed door. Your neighbor is your family. Your extended family members are welcome to your home as much as you're welcome in theirs. They help you raise your children. We don't have that here.
Yeah, that's one of the things.
We have a saying in Somali. We have a saying in Somali. Something around that. Okay, everybody is busy with their own. We are slaves to our own cause, essentially. You and I are here today. This hour that we're sitting in front of each other, it's an hour away from the rest of our lives. Hopefully, it's a productive hour.
Hopefully, sure.
But in the same way, we're thinking of this hour as being either useful or unuseful in whatever way we'd like to think of it. Useful, actually. But our mothers and our fathers live life on a cyclic manner. They have no gradient which goes up. They have no way of improving it. They simply like to maybe, you know, save a little bit of money and actually try and start a little bit of business or something like that. Few people might do that. Not everybody, but few people certainly would do that. But like I said, coming back to why I would like to blame fathers for this whole thing, is that they are absent from the lives of their children. Mothers are present in the lives of their children on the whole, in this community, in this environment, in the West, in the UK. Because dads, great, if they're in the picture, alhamdulillah. They're not in the picture in the right way. They're in the picture as breadwinners. That's it. They go out, they go to work, they come back. The moment they get home is that over here you're talking about, or back home, or in general? It's a culture which has been inherited partly from back home, but I think here it's slightly different. That over here, people seem to be more tired for whatever reason. Okay, so which means as soon as people get here, as soon as dads get home, they don't want to be disturbed, and that's if they want to stay home. They don't want to be disturbed. Children, take them away from me.
Yeah.
You know, whereas women, take the children away from me. That's the wrong way of thinking. They're your children. You had as much to do with their life as their mother.
Yeah.
If you're not communicating with them, if you're not sitting your son, if you're not sitting your daughter, what kind of example, and having a conversation with them, what kind of example are you giving them?
Totally.
This is the real question.
Absolutely. How much do you think they understood the challenges that we faced in this country as a black minority ethnic? So did we even see ourselves as black minority ethnic?
I think we got on the same point of this one. I think Somalis, on the whole, don't recognize themselves as black people, first of all.
It's a tragic, wallahi, it is a tragic.
It's a very unfortunate
That is one thing
reality.
I cannot understand.
But I think that's a false sense of pride, first of all. It's clear-cut false sense of pride. What you have is those parents that came here in the 90s, those that came here in the 80s would have experienced a lot more racism, for example, or they would have been able to see it, or certainly been more exposed to it than those parents that would have come here in the 2000s and the 2010s. that being said, the level of communication that they would have had or the level of exposure they would have had doesn't necessarily mean they knew much about it, because they stayed exclusive to their own society, exclusive to themselves, and everything else was outside of their wall, outside of their borders. It just meant I don't have to deal with it. That's an issue. It's black people's issue.
Yeah.
It's not my issue. I don't have to do anything with it. If it's a different issue, it's a non-Muslim issue. Got nothing to do with it. Again, I have my deen. And, that's all I need. I have my health. I have my family.
So
I have my
no
life.
Acknowledgement that
I
they
don't need to worry
themselves
about
is
it.
part of that community.
They're not, as far as they're concerned, they're not part of the wider BME community. They're not. Some starting to recognize this now.
Yeah.
So because the same issues that affect them because their children are now of age of getting into trouble and now being labeled or stigmatized in the same way as as the BME communities would have been otherwise been stigmatized as. Unfortunately, there is obviously, I'm not going to get into it, but there is a heavy bias against BME communities, on many levels, on many platforms. But
so
they didn't recognize that.
Earlier, you touched on the there's this sense of pride or false pride or something like that. So how do we tackle that? I mean, obviously, we don't even see ourselves as being part of the BME. That we see ourselves as somebody else. We do have this sense of false pride within our community, and how do we tackle that? And
you see, I think, as much as there are many issues that exist within the BME communities and other social issues that exist, whether it's demographic or socioeconomic, I don't like to emphasize, or I'd like for people to not emphasize group identity, because it's group identity which leads people astray.
Exactly.
Overall, but rather people should individualize their life and take control of it.
Yeah.
If you live your life by group identity and start thinking what happens to
it causes you also probably groupie syndrome, I think some people call it.
Probably, yeah. I mean, what happens is that people, because of what kind of white brush is painted with certain members of community, you think you're going to experience that. In itself means that you may not become part of that community. You may subconsciously revert, and just.
Does that give you identity crisis though? Because you assume and think that you have this pride. Oh, I'm not this. I am better than them. For example, let's be honest. The way we see the other African community is totally different to the way we see ourselves. We don't even see us as African as some people. It's just now that I think we're starting to understand that we even part of the African community.
Yeah. I've been asked by many other black people that Somalis think of themselves as something else.
Yeah.
I've been asked outright, why is it that Somalis disassociate themselves from Africans? When actually, when you're ticking any average form, whether it's government or not, you're probably, if you're ticking your ethnic origin, you're ticking black African, right? I mean, there might be some argument of your heritage being slightly from other places. Yeah. We certainly, there are many people.
But geographically, we are in Africa.
That's just it. Geographically,
we are in Africa.
And not only that, most of our people are actually black.
Yeah. We are black. We're not white.
What I mean? There you go.
So where do they get this?
But unfortunately, there's that disconnection. So they don't see it. But that is only another addition to a continuous disillusion between the young people in this society anyway. Young people didn't have anything to inherit from their parents in the sense of, empowerment, especially through example. Whether it's success in wealth, whether it's success in integration, whether it's success in deen. Okay, deen, you can certainly argue that our people actually, we live our life through religion as much as possible, but that's primarily the older generation.
Yeah.
The younger generation, however, their minds are far more volatile, far more fragile, and hence why a lot of That's why there are a lot of them. A lot of them are at risk.
How can we change that mindset?
I believe having the right conversations to start with our young, not with other people first, but with our young. Speak to them, learn about them, engage with them with thought-provoking ideas. You know, speak to them and say, what do you think of this issue that exists in society? If they give you a laissez-faire answer, maybe you need to now have the right conversations in front of them and not shut them up, because we have this sad reality that our young gets told to be quiet, in front of adults, because you're not old enough to speak in front of us, be quiet. I'm firmly against that. I think young people should learn how to be part of society, how to be part of the right conversations, even amongst adults. It's not a strange idea, to have that, if we look at the West, if we just want to look at religion, the ulama, if you are listening to this, go and ask about the ulama of how the young integrated into the religion and how they were able to express their ideas without being muzzled.
Yeah, you see it all the time. Oh, adiga waa yar tahay, or waxaan waa laga weyn yahay, or you don't have an opinion of this, or your opinion doesn't count because I think ilma ka tahay waxaan ka baxay waxaasaydi. I think that also plays into this whole thing of just putting you down, because when when you're growing up, you are not only finding yourself, but you're trying to look at your surroundings and educate yourself, and you want to have discussions and things like that. But the way they just shut you down, I think it's not very healthy. I think we very strictly speaking on a time wise, we don't have much, so we will try to cover as much points as possible. So my next point that I want a little bit for us to discuss is the issue with tribalism. Do you think we have inherited this tribalism from our parents? And do we still, are we still keen on this whole tribalism thing? Does it play a big part in our life today?
Very much so. I think our parents still live the life and the way of thinking as back home. Tribalism has some positives and some negatives associated with it. It's a sense of identity, it's a sense of belonging, it's a sense of safety. Once you belong to a certain group, you might feel more comfortable in expressing yourself a lot better. But unfortunately, if history says anything in our country, it says, especially best part of the last 30 years, it says tribalism is a bad idea. Yeah. It's divisive. Yeah. It's not inclusive. It's not inclusive. It discriminates it discriminates with prejudice, without any reservation, actually. But our parents or the older generations seem to think that because we are from so-and-so tribe, we are better than you. Our children cannot marry anything other than our own tribe, for example. I think you and I both have experienced many examples where parents outright refused any kind of interaction, essentially, in the sense of marriage and things like that, with a different tribe, different identity, different ethnic group. Because of that, what it gave to the young is, yes, you have a belonging of some kind, but that belonging is only to be used as discriminatory. Yeah. Because you are better than everybody else. No one else is on par with you. No one else can ever hope to be higher than you. So it's arrogance. It's a false sense of pride,
So do you see any benefits in this whole...
In tribalism? Yeah. Identity, yes. The benefit in it is that children should know where they come from. Yeah. Western society, sadly, has lost self-identity to begin with, as in where they originate from. People won't be able to give you a an idea of what type of people they themselves come from, because there has been so much intermixing that they have no sense of history in the sense of individual family history, if that makes sense. Whereas you and I can probably easily count another 20 names into our history, 20 of our forefathers, quite easily. I can actually do more than that, but quite comfortably, right? But it shows that we know stories from generations ago within our tribe, if you can call it, within our family and things like that. That sense of pride has some good in it. It's self-identity. You know who you are. You're not going to be shaken by not knowing who you are. What if today UK revokes our citizenship? Let's be honest. We are immigrants. We came here. Yeah, we're both British citizens. Great. We try to be as productive as we can in society. But what if laws dictate, new laws dictate, and the fascism starts taking over, and new laws dictate that we are no longer welcome here? What then?
Yeah.
We have an identity. We're not going to be shaken as easily.
No.
We might say, yeah, okay, our current livelihood has now been
So
uprooted.
can you protect your identity without being so much inclined with your tribe?
One must protect their identity, I think, because when you
is
know
it
yourself,
connected, the tribe and identity? Is it one or the other, or you can have both?
I think self-identity trumps tribe. But tribalism, the positive sense of tribalism, is part of your identity. You are, what do they say? What's the saying? Don't judge a book by its cover. You're going to be judged by your cover. So if you're not sure of what your own book says, as in who you are, then you're going to be subject to what people are saying, and you're not going to know anymore. So self-identity is key. When you know about yourself, you're more assured. You can express yourself far more comfortably. You can engage with people of different thought, of different experiences and identities, especially people that disagree with you. People that agree with us, easy to find them. Family. We have similar ideas. We have similar thoughts. We're not going to comfortably disagree with each other, because actually it's quite easy to just say, yeah, I understand what you're saying because I am you. But when you have somebody from a different society, from the wider society, engaging with you and saying, actually, this point, maybe it's political, maybe it's socioeconomic, maybe it's some other issue, tells you, this is what I actually think, and you have no sense of identity yourself, you will probably disagree with them first, but not know why. And then you will agree with them because you don't know how to argue back, or constructively, or how to debate back constructively. But when you're assured, when you're self-assured, when you know who you are, you will be able to deliver yourself and actually say, actually, contrary to what you're saying, I respect it, but I disagree because so and so and so, I believe so and so. You may have a right of center views. If you cannot express it, if you don't know you have that right of center views and you cannot express it, you have no identity. The same thing if you have left of center views and you don't know what it is that you represent, you still again cannot represent it. So you have no identity in that way. Okay,
so in our community, say obviously in Somalia we speak pretty much one language. There's a different dialects here and there. We have one religion. So our dakhan is pretty much similar or the same, I think, all across Somalia. Why on earth do we need this whole sense of to belong in a tribe? If we think everything about tribe is not really positive, why are we why are we clinging to this whole tribe thing then? What is it giving us at the moment? Nothing but destruction, if you ask me.
If I answer your question and look at it from the perspective of the negative side, I would say we don't need it.
We don't need it.
But if I look at it from the positive side, I would say إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا.
But
So
I totally get that. But at the moment, for the past 20, 30 years, what destroyed our country and our society here and everywhere, I've seen other parts in Europe as well. There's this little clan groups, condensed in one area. So, for example, you say certain group or Abgal or something, or are known to be in this area, or Hamra are known to be in this area. I mean, we've left Somalia because of this whole destruction, and we came here and exactly the same thing. Isn't that just a waste of time?
As much as I would like to say yes.
Yeah. So you're so basically, I'm getting the sense that you are pro Khabir then.
Not necessarily, no. I am pro self-identity, and I think.
But self-identity is different.
From,
Listen, Somalia, as we have an identity. Obviously, being a Somali is your identity. That is number one. That's stamped, right? Okay. It probably says on our forehead.
Okay.
You can tell. You can tell the Somali from an Ethiopian. That is our identity. Okay. We have a religion, alhamdulillah, which we should use as a parameter, or whatever that we however we want to live our life. So where does this whole, I mean, obviously knowing yourself and your lineage is one thing, but this whole tribal thing where you go into a group, or where you marry from within this group, and if you whatever, I just don't understand. Why do we need that in this day and age?
It's not that we need it or we don't need it. I think it's that, first of all, our parents still haven't changed their ways from exactly how they were back home.
Yep.
Because of that, the question of do we need it or don't need it is moot. It's irrelevant.
Why is it irrelevant?
It's irrelevant because the relevance of that question is something that the older generation do not comprehend themselves. So therefore, they are, for lack of better words, they're set in their ways. Okay, but now the young, you will find that are intermixing a lot more. They're marrying from different tribes. They're marrying from different ethnicities and different communities.
I think that is still a minority, though.
Which is, of course, it's a minority, but it's better than none. It's better than none. Because if we stayed rigid, if our generation stayed rigid and only stuck with what our parents told us, we wouldn't have moved beyond what our parents did. We wouldn't have been able to transcend their way of thinking. We are in a different society. The society that they grew up in, that they matured in, is not here. But yet they are with that, in their minds, they are in that environment. We can see that we're not here, we're there. We're not back home, we're not back in Somalia. So therefore, we cannot think in exactly the same way as they do. We have to balance our parents' views on one side and society's views on the other side, and then find our own self-identity within that. You said, you're sensing that I'm pro-tribalism and things like that. I'm not. Okay, I'm not. I'm of two tribes, as you've probably guessed, as you know. But I'm not going to go too much. I'm not going to go into details of that. Okay, but the Hamar community in Somalia, one of the most stigmatized.
Yeah.
By other tribes. Okay. The war, and the problems that existed in Somalia meant that it's our tribes that didn't pick up guns and join the war and things like that, trying to control everybody, right? Because of that, we ended up being stigmatized, heavily discriminated against. I'm pretty sure you know many people that either lost their lives or lost many things because of that. It's why we ran away from Somalia, or why our parents ran away from Somalia. If they had any kind of safety, they wouldn't have been here. If you ask any Somali parent nowadays, if you say, would you rather be here or back home but with peace, they would say back home.
Absolutely. I think we are running out of time. Probably it's by the hour mark.
Yeah.
So if we can just squeeze one more question into our discussion, and hopefully the final one. How does education affect our social cohesion? And if we look at the stats in the Somali community, I think it's pretty scary. I've digged in a little bit online, and I couldn't really find much up to up-to-date information, but the ones that I found was probably about 10 years ago. The stats is totally stacked against us when it comes to education,
Yeah.
underperforming, when it comes to employment, high unemployment, you know, everything else. So, you know, how does it affect our social cohesion and, you know, what needs to be done to improve?
I think some of the numbers that feed the statistics you looked at is representative of our parents, and some of them are representative
Does
of
it
the
drip
young people.
into our
They're very different.
generation?
To some degree. But if I look at just the parents, for example, they, like I said earlier, they had a goal to come here. They achieved it. Their goal was to try and find a roof over their head, find security, find, you know, some way of having an income. That was taken care of by the state, majority. Although things have changed in the last 10 years or so, state put them up. You know, these are refugees, let's put them up. That removed any kind of ambition from them, because here's money for doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Meant, or subconsciously meant, I can have more children to have money.
Yeah.
Okay? Because of that, the high unemployment exists. When we look at it from a parent's perspective, there's a good number of parents who are unemployed, especially mothers who are unemployed, because, you know, they are getting a comfortable earning in their mind. You know, in their mind. You and I will disagree with that, but
Comfortable earning
in their mind. But if you really look at it, not only do they survive from it,
Yeah, they
from
did,
benefits,
they
they
Raised
feed
their
multiple
kids.
households back
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
So it shows you how, what was the slogan? You know, every little helps or something like that. You know, something like that. Yeah, you know, it's that kind of mentality that they've come here with. They know how to save, how to stretch the pound, essentially. Okay, which is a good idea. It's a
And
great
they
thing.
have.
Okay, but the young people, I think you said education.
Yeah.
Their unemployment is not like the unemployment of the parents. The unemployment of the parents is solely because their goal was to be here and, you know, tranquilo, relax, let's be here, right? But our goal is not that. We are at the precipice, at the beginning of our life. We're not at the precipice of our life, but we are at the beginning of it, if anything. Okay, our ambition is ahead of us. Because of that, our young haven't educated themselves quite well, and primarily boys. It's primarily boys. The girls are actually outperforming boys by miles. Many of our young girls are nurses, teachers, doctors, you know, lawyers, starting to pop up as well quite well, and entrepreneurs. Young men, young Somali men are the most disillusioned of the whole, I think, of most communities. They have no place they can fit in their mind.
Why is that?
Partly because they didn't have anything, call it a will of some kind, a will to inherit from the parents.
Going back, do you think
Okay.
there's that sense of pride that, you know what, you know, that masculine sort of.
It's a false masculinity again.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. First of all, yeah, tribalism leads to that. So you had the idea of tribalism, you're so and so.
Usually the leader
Okay.
of the tribe will be, you know, the firstborn or the male or something like that.
Generally, yeah, you're
Generally,
right.
yeah.
I mean, let's forget about how tribalism worked in Somalia for a second, and let's look at it how it transpires or it's morphed into the young people here. Okay, what you have is young men who are teenagers, who are in their 20s and in their 30s as well, who are just absolute losers, but with potential. Losers with potential. They don't even realize it.
Loses with potential.
They don't realize it because all they see is a repetition of their day. Okay? What our parents didn't realize is that young Somali men fit in a category of, you know, a lot may argue with this, but they fit in a category of black, Muslim, and unwelcome. They live that life. They don't know it, but they live that life. They feed the rhetoric. The parents feed the rhetoric. Young people feed the rhetoric. Because if I'm not wanted, if I'm not liked, then I'm going to retaliate somehow, right? Their retaliation is the wrong one. their retaliation ought to be, I'm going to take control of myself. You know, I'm going to take control of what makes me me. I'm going to figure out what it is that I need to do after I figure out who I am. So who you are, self-identity comes first. Then you can figure out what it is, what kind of ambition you can work towards and focus on it tirelessly. But that kind of way of thinking is not one that they've inherited from the parents. So they have to cultivate it. They have to cultivate it themselves. You and I might be.
I think they might have inherited it from the parents, but hopefully that will be discussion for another day. The reason why I say that is obviously, you know, we're not going to discuss it now, and you know, our program's coming to an end. And you know, the first generation parents, that when they came here, obviously there was a lot of misuse in Qad, and I think as a result from that, you know, it had led to these boys who you describe as a, you know, losers on what was it that you said?
Losers with potential.
Losers with potential, and literally, you know, wasting their life away on the streets. I think they got it from the parents that chew Qad, because obviously in order for you to chew the Qad, you know, you will need to sit down and socialize with your fellow, you know, chewers or whatever you call it, and spend hours and hours just chatting nonsense, you know, with that stuff in your mouth. I think probably that had a bit of influence in them, and maybe as a result, I think they became very disillusioned in society. Yeah. And Sheikh Ahmed, thank you very much. Our program has actually come to an end, and I think it was a brilliant discussion, and hopefully one that was a beneficial. We haven't really discussed about, you know, the second part of our program, which was about the you know, the young people and you know, and other stuff. But hopefully, inshallah, hopefully we will have you again on the program in the next few weeks, if possible. And we would like to thank everybody else, our you know, listeners, viewers on Facebook, and everybody else. So hopefully, inshallah, I hope you enjoyed the program. And if ever you want to join in, you can always call the studio, which is 0333 444 0940, and all these will be recorded and onto our live onto the Facebook page of Revive FM. You can find everything there. And Jazakallahu khairan, and thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.